Hello, good morning. Hello.
Good morning, sir.
Shivamanor, or anybody else joining? I think it's only you who joined. I think we'll wait for say 5 minutes and then start.
Okay, sir.
Okay, let's go ahead with the class now. So today we are discussing about ship management practices. Subject is ship management practices, as you know. So what is basically ship management practices? What are the activities which is involved in managing a ship or a shipping company or a shipping business? Who are the agencies involved in handling shipping business will be learned in this module. So unit 1 says shipping company. Let's see what is a shipping company now. So before we get into that, you will learn following such details when we cover this module. Sir, key importance of questions which may be asked for your examination also. So once we finish this module, you should be able to answer the composition of shipping company, the activities of commercial department, technical department, and crewing department in a shipping company. What are the roles of commercial department, technical, and crewing department in a shipping company? And you should be able to address or highlight the activities undertaken exclusively by in-house departments and what are the in-house departments. Then you should know or list out the ship management functions and what ship management functions can be outsourced and why is it being outsourced, and importance of ship being registered, why is ship being registered, what is national and open registers, and role of ship classification system. So all this we will cover in this model. So shipping companies are organized for the purpose of running a direct line and regular service between certain ports. Okay. So for the purpose of owning vessels, which may be a charter or as when the business is open, whether it is a linear service or tram service or chartering service. It is the duty of the company in their own interest to provide speedy and safe vessels. Okay, so keeping them fit for a continuous days or continuous service is their responsibility. So the ship management is an international business of many characteristics, including low margins, relatively low barriers to entry, heavy paperwork, intense competition, and high risk. If things go wrong, it is a very high risk business, and a need to provide service 24 hours a day. It is also a business where the ship manager must be capable of tailoring the service to different needs of individual clients while retaining the efficiency and cost effectiveness in the service delivery. Okay. So when the shipping business is not very easy, so when we enter into the shipping company or shipping business, you have a lot of type of chartering service there. You have tram services there. You have linear service there. So during these services, it is the duty and responsibility of the company to provide the seaworthy ships or seaworthy vessels. Seaworthy vessels is the ship's duty to provide, the company's duty to provide. And the management of this continuous service is what we are learning in this subject. So the ship management practice is basically the overall study of operation, service, and the outcome of the work which we do in this business. So, now is it easy if you ask? No, because it is there's many characteristics involved here, and is the ship management is in a very work in a very low margin frame. It is relatively low barriers to entry, and it has a heavy paperwork because everything is documented. In our previous subjects, we did learn what is contract, what is agreement. You can see the paperwork involved in it. It is intense in competition. There is the rates are very cutthroat rates. Everybody give very cheap rates because they want business. And the risk factor is so high because it is unpredictable because you are transporting one goods from other goods, other places, and you never know what happens the next minute. There can be technical problems, there can be weather issues, there can be human power, manpower problems. There's a lot of high risk involved where your consignment may not reach the destination on time. So when this happens, it is the duty of ship management to provide a 24-hour service or a proper updation to the client. And that service is also very important because you need a ongoing business to happen because you don't do this one time. So because once you give a 24-hour service, then only your client will like your business, the way how you do the service, then only he can recommend or he will come back again. If there is a very poor or pathetic service, you cannot run this business also. Any business in for that matter. So here also the same principle is applicable. So basically, the ship manager will be there, and he must be capable of tailoring the service to different needs of individual clients. Individual clients will be of different requirements. So the ship manager's duty is to find their requirement and address that requirement on an effective basis. So how does the organization in a shipping company be? So when we say ship management, ship manager, or the owner of the ship, how is the organizational structure of this shipping company? So now, for example, if you take any organization for that matter, any small company or a big company, everywhere you have an organizational structure, a hierarchy to make your work easy. So the purpose of stage in general overview here is that who is responsible for what? That is what organization of shipping company actually. So the shipping ship manager, what is his activity? And at the top of any ship owning company or operating corporate structure will be the board of directors. So who is heading the board of directors? The board of directors will be headed by the chairman or a president or the MD, managing director. So this board of directors reports to the president, chairman, or managing director of the company. Now it is their task to determine the overall policy of the business. So it is the team, this team, who decides the overall task or policies or on which direction the company has to go is being decided from this team. This is called as a core team, the member of core team of any organization. This is as similar as any organization. You can compare with any organization. Okay. So this team decides how the business has to go and which direction should it go. Say, for example, when there is a peak season, so any business when you take, there will be a peak season or a dull season. So when there is a peak season of business, it is the board of directors who decide whether to implement more vessels because you know that peak season is there. There is more business will come on this particular month. On this particular route, there will be more business which may need attraction. So we need to deploy more vessels. Say for example, you can take current situation. Now there is a COVID situation. So what happens? There is a need of lot of medical necessities, medical instruments, the medicinal instrument, pharmaceutical requirement. That is more during this period. So, if you are the president or you are the managing director of the company, so the board of directors all will sit and decide. Now, the company, if the company was doing all this while transporting some random goods, now they will decide, okay, now because there is a demand of what? Pharmaceutical items, our focus has to be on shipping more of pharmaceutical companies. We must target them and then acquire the business and utilize it. So this direction, who decides? It's not just the ship manager or somebody. Now, or being an employee, you can't just go and decide, okay, now today onwards I will do this. It's a whole team, the board of directors, headed by the chairman or president. They will decide how the company has to go and what is the future of the company. How will it go? On which direction it has to go. Okay. So the policy areas which will be decided by top management include the philosophy of the company strategy. Okay. So any company's philosophy is determined by this board of directors and the president. And as is mentioned, the type, the size of vessels used. Which vessel should we use? Should we use a small one or bigger one, or the capacity is bigger, a bigger equipment? That and all is decided by the board of directors and president. Fleet replacement policy. What is fleet replacement policy? So you have a certain number of ships with you. Now it's time to replace, or it is under lease you have taken. So you want to give it back, or again you want to change your fleet, or you want to buy a fleet, new vessels, or you want to charter it. All this is being decided by this board of directors. Next is the flag policy, and then the trades or routes that the company will serve. That is also decided here, and then financial performance, in-house ship management. So financial performance. So how is the financial performance going on? And what direction is the company going? Because finance is important. At the end of the day, everybody has to get their salary also, right? So they will decide how the finance is the profit company is going in the profit direction. So this is all finance related decisions are made in board of directors. So having established the policy of board will delegate the management of this function with various in-house departments or contact them out as appropriate. Whenever such decisions are being taken, the certain or the actual department is being contacted and they have been communicated with what to do and what is their next need to be done. So the way in which this practical service are dealt with, and especially how the various functions are grouped together, will differ. However, all these different activities will need to be provided either from within company or by contracting out to independent ship management or crew company. Next step, outright purchase. So what is outright purchase? This is a very traditional way of procuring ships is to buy them outright. The company will either use its own cash resource to buy the vessel, or more likely obtain loan or mortgage secured on the vessel. So it's a very traditional way to buy or to use the ship. The procuring is to buy them outright. Okay. So the how will they buy it? It can be either cash, it can be they use it for obtaining loan. Okay. So that's how the first point. So you are obtaining or buying a ship. So what is that new building? So the very largest companies may employ their own naval architects and design staff to create the type and size of new building they want for the future. Or this function may be delegated to independent naval architects. So more commonly, companies may buy vessel, built it in a pre-existing shipyard, designed the way they need. We call it tailor-made. So when they get something now, for example, when you are buying an instrument from somebody, imagine you are buying a laptop from somebody. Now, after buying this laptop, you are not happy with the design how it is made. So you do this extra fittings for it. You change the RAM size or you try to do something. Okay. So that is similarly called as new building. So when you procure a ship, now it is your duty and the way how you want things in the ship is being designed by your way. So you tailor make it. Okay, the existing one you will remove and you tailor make according to your choice, where you will know that okay, so I have so much this staff, so I need so many bunkers or so many beds in the ship. So I need to carry so and so equipment from one place to another place. So the structure of the ship has to be so and so. All this you can decide and you can do a design. Okay, that's good. Next, purchase and sale of second-hand vessels. So other companies may concentrate on building up their fleet by buying second-hand tonnage for this purpose, and will use the service of sale and purchase using a broker. Okay, and financial intermediates. So increasingly, the ship owning companies, what they do is they use a very innovative ways to own a ship now. So the new way is that intermediates. So this is because either the company does not have sufficient borrowing capacity. When the company doesn't have that money to buy it wants to operate, but still it wants to operate. But in an intermediary, nine leasing companies, there is a better position to obtain tax benefits here. Okay, from purchasing ships, they can the operating company. Then the concept is that the approach can be seen as a leasing rather than owning the vessel. Another way to get a refinance is way of sale and lease back. So there is another way is sale and lease back. So time charters that we have already discussed. So other companies will time charter suitable tonnage from the other ship owning companies. Time charters are also used to acquire a tonnage to meet short-term commodities or fluctuations in the fleet. Perhaps to replace tonnage during the dry dock program or to meet the seasonal high level of demand. So that is a time charter. So whenever there is a demand or something, you use that particular time and you charge the ship. So that is time charter. Now, when now what is ship management. Now we discussed about all the board of directors and the duties and how we shift upward and what do we do when we do not have efficient fund. How do we procure ship and all this thing. Now let's see what is ship management. Okay, ship management comprise various types of management service covering all aspects of daily vessel operation. Okay, so the two management contracts signed between the ship owner and a ship manager are therefore not exactly the same. You must know this part. It's not the same. There are two contracts between the ship owner and ship manager are not the same. So for the purpose of defining the ship management, the following shortened version of definition used by John Strupp as follows. The professional supply of a single or a range of service by a management company separate from vessel's ownership, where professional supply means that the supplier or the ship owner provides services to the user. Okay. So according to the contracted terms, in return, the management fee. In doing so, the ship manager is required to ensure that the vessel always complies with international rules and regulations and is run in a safe and cost efficient manner without threat to the environment and is maintained so as to preserve as far as possible to accepted value. Okay? Now, the ship manager here must also take the responsibility. Here, he has to take the responsibility of its actions. Okay, it's not that he's just standing there. So, single or range of service means the ship owner can opt for a comprehensive range or just one service from number of offered by the ship owner. So, it's he who decides how much service he would need to use. So, this service comprises of three major groups. Now, now we'll get into the important factors of what are the major management three services which is involved here. One is technical management, and the other one is crew management and commercial management. Okay, so the management company separate from vessels ownership means that the supplier of the service, that is the ship manager, is independent from user. User is means ship owner working with its own establishment. This office may be located several thousands miles away from where ship owner is domicile and in a completely different time zone to where the vessel in question normally trades. There is no common share holding interest between the ship owner and the manager. But in practice, such a shareholding interest exists in many instances. Although in every case, the ship manager will function as a separate cost center and provide an equitable service to all clients according to a well-defined contract and detailed budget agreed between the two main contracting parties. So this is how the ship management looks like. The full management is given here. Now you can see what are the departments under which the categories come. So if you see the technical department, what things come? Purchasing, maintenance, inspection, the performance monitoring, budgeting, reporting, and S&T management, dry docking, certification, emergency contingency, insurance. This all comes under the technical department. So next is the crew management. What do they do? And then the commercial management. What is their roles and ancillary management there. So this is how it is being divided. So ship management. What are the services? So we have already discussed that ship management as a term encompassing miscellaneous type of service. Essentially, This services comprise three types of groups, main groups: technical department, crew management, and commercial management. Okay. Plus a fourth group of what can be termed as ancillary service also is there. A full management. Now let's see what is more. Where technical and crew management service are provided. Okay. So with or without commercial management, then the contract between the ship owner and manager is referred as full management. So what do you mean by full management services? So when if there is a contract between ship owner and the ship manager, where the service, full service means technical service is also given, crew service is also given. So this both service when the agreement is written, both services will be given. That means it is called as full management. So what is part management then? So in the part management, what happens? Technical and crewing only contract are typically termed as part management. So only manpower is being given. Okay, so that is part management. So now let's discuss roles of commercial people and crewing. What are the roles? Commercial department operations. Okay. What is commercial department? Is? Commercial department is somewhere where the skill task, say, seaworthiness and commercially sound condition. The technical aspect, which is also discussed below, we have it below. The ship managers have to have a department to ensure the ship carries out tasks to which it has been committed by commercial people, the investors, who have arranged the employment through the chartering brokers. Okay. So the commercial department will ensure the ship is ready. That is their commercial department's duty, the operational commercial department's duty. That the ship is seaworthy. We know what is seaworthy. It is in a very good condition. Okay. It is in a condition to carry goods or people from so and so place to an accompanying journey. So it is the commercial department's duty to carry out revenue earning work also. Okay. So what is revenue earning work? The ship is ready to carry out revenue earning work means ship is ready to go and do the business. That whose responsibility? Commercial department operations responsibility. Now the operation staffs to carry out all the many tasks needed to fulfill this commitment, that is earn the revenue, do the sales, everything comes under commercial department. The essential job is to ensure that the ship is sent to the right place at the right time and then told where to go next. The route planning, everything is done under the commercial department. Now, which direction the ship has to go and what time it has to reach there. There's a lot of technical things which is involved here also. Say, for example, there will be some routings which is very short in nature. So, commercial department will choose which route to go and on what time to reach there to sometimes escape from some sort of taxes from the port. See, so all these decisions are made. So all these decisions are made in commercial department. I think somebody's mic is on. Can you ask them? Devanand Gaming. Okay. So that is these are the roles of commercial department when it comes to the shipping. So they basically act as backbone also because it is the revenue which is being given back to the company is decided by the state. So and it is their responsibility to handle this in a very proper channel. So decisions regarding how much bunker fuel will be ideal quantity and where this should be taken on board. As I mentioned, the sales is important here. So the revenue to gather on this shipping business is decided by this commercial team. So they will make deals with bunker fuel bunkers. They will make corporate deals with a lot of cities where they can get cheap fuel, and they will decide where is it very efficient way to take fuel. So these decisions are made by the commercial. Now, ensuring the agents at all ports of call are advised that their responses are acted upon time. When they are acting like the time checkers also, they ensure that the agents in all ports call are advised that their response, their all their answers are acted quickly, that in charge the commercial team takes care. Now, if there is any
போட்டா
crew
எல்லாம்
changes,
டோட்டல் ஆல் ஓவர் இந்தியா போட்டா பிரச்சனை இல்ல.
so if there is any crew changes,
கம்பெனிஸ்
somebody is-
ஓடுதுன்றாங்க. ஆனா
can
டிஸ்ட்ரிபியூட்டர்
somebody
போகாது. எப்படி
please
வேலைக்கு போக
ask
முடியும்?
Devanand to please mute?
டிஸ்ட்ரிக்ட்ல
I think I can mute. Yeah. So, ensuring that the agents at all ports of call are advised that their response are accident. We discussed what it is. Now the crew changes. So how are the crew shifts being monitored? Okay, and this particular crew will have so and so shift. All those crew changes have to be organized at an appropriate intervals, and who decides this? The commercial department. Okay, so when you are going for a job tomorrow and you say you are working in a commercial department on a shipping company, layman may not understand, but somebody who is working within ship company will know what is your duties. Understand? So this is all technical terms which we should keep in mind, which will help you in your job also in future. Okay. So next, what dry docking activity? Okay, what is dry docking activity? Dry docking activity is also harmonized with the commercial commitments. Okay, so while many specialist takes can be passed, the appropriate departments, the operation staff have to coordinate it all. So this coordination also who takes care? The commercial department. So here you can understand the importance of commercial department in a shipping company. So they have so and so responsibilities and duties to finish or accompany when a ship is being operated. So this dry docking activity is like when the ship is used for gone for repair or it is gone for service. You know how we do the regular service when it is not working or it has some issues. That dry docking activity has to be what do you say harmonized with the commercial commitments, means you have to adjust in such a way that the vehicle is gone for service and come back also. And now you say example you are running a what do you say cab business and you have 10 cabs, and out of 10 cabs 8 cabs are not working. So they're got some issues, all engine problem. So now next day you have a business of all 8 cabs have business to take some passenger to so and so place. So it is commercial duty, commercial commitment that the 8 cabs are ready within next 24 hours, or because you have duty the next day. So this harmonized balancing of the servicing, dry docking activity and commercial commitment has to be taken care by this department. Okay. So that is the dry docking activity harmony. So this also because the why they are handling it, because again this is revenue. This is the revenue is handled by commercial department. So it is why they have to coordinate and get all this done. So let's see. Again, we'll discuss about commercial. So most services are subcontracted. So what happens when this commercial department can't really handle or give this entire work to one particular people, because there's a lot of manpower involved here. So most services are here are subcontracted with exception of acting arranging of the ships commercial activity. Thus the contract with the brokers and the fixing of charters, or in the case of linears or marketing and documentation, are under the owner's total control. So it is all under the owner's total control beside. So there has to be a very close liaison between the commercial people and the operation department, who have to ensure such things are always having the right amounts of bunker at suitable times at suitable places. Now, the commercial department in process ensures close liaison between the operation staff and the commercial department. Is far simpler in some companies. This has developed into such a close tie that it is so difficult to see where the precise divisions lie. Okay, It is the commercial department's job to decide what business to go for and authorize the brokers accordingly. So as I mentioned earlier, let's go back to the car example, also, the cab example. So when there is a 8 cabs, now you have to liaise with whom? You will have to liaise with the operation team who is fixing the cars or the mechanical team. Okay. So now both has to communicate each other. Both has to understand the what is the importance of this. Now when you are communicating the operation team that okay, see, I want this 8 cabs ready next day. If operation team is not responding to you on time and they take this very neglectfully, okay, that means you are losing revenue, correct? So this both has to go hand in glove. So operation staff and commercial department has to be hand in glove. So they have to work so closely, so that sometimes in some companies it is very difficult to understand who is operation staff and who is commercial department, because they work in such a close and harmonious way to sort out any problem. Okay, that is what the meaning of this. I hope it is clear now. The same thing happens even in the shipping business. Now, the commercial people have the task of ensuring that it is profitable as possible, so that an understanding of the market conditions. So, again, it is the responsibility of the commercial people to say basically have the right amount of bunkers at a suitable time we discussed. At proper time, it has to be so much space or so much at proper time and proper place. The bunkers has to be available. Okay, why this has to be ready? Because they need revenue, they need profit. So for that, they have to be available at particular time at particular space. When there is demand only, they have to be there. When otherwise, when there is no demand, if their bunkers are freely available, nobody will need it also. So all this profitable decision making is done by commercial team. Okay, so that is where they contact the brokers and ask for leads, and then that's where the decision making happens. So the skill at producing voyage estimates to enable viability and comparison with their own business, which is an important part of this. So here broker also plays an important role. So each voyage cannot be looked at in isolation. So, and I must be kept on where the ship will become empty and what sort of following business may be available by analyzing voyage estimates. So this is also the commercial team this thing. So you cannot just once the voyage is started, also you start your voyage. Okay, once you start your trip, once you start your business from one place it is moving. So you can't just leave it off saying, okay, now my job is done. Now it's gone. You cannot leave it for isolation. You must keep an eye where the ship is becoming empty, where are the goods being unloaded, where is the cargo being sent, and where so much, because it's not necessarily all has to go and drop in one place. At one port, you may drop 100 tons of cargo, and the rest of cargo you are taking to some other place. So when you drop this 100 tons of cargo in one point, you should look for opportunity to again uplifting another 100 tons from that point. Okay, that is where you have to keep analyzing and estimating how much bunkers do you have, how much space do you have. So while all departments in ship management office are vital, the responsibility of eventual success of venture rests in commercial department. So as I said, the success, even the success of this venture rests in the commercial department, because again, important thing is that the revenue is being decided, or revenue handling or the profit handling is decided completely upon the decisions of commercial department. Okay. Now let's see deployment of a vessel and shipbroking. How do we deploy a vessel? What kind of vessel? And from where do we procure it? So that we'll discuss in deployment of this. The commercial management involves in provision of miscellaneous shipbroking services relating to the employment of vessel according to instructions laid down by the ship owner. Specifically, the commercial manager represents the interest of ship owner by the following way. You will see what is the service. So the services are the marketing of the vessel on the voyage. Okay, time and larboard chart market, including the provisions of market data, voyage estimating to assist the owner to select the most advantageous employment. Once the chosen employment has been selected, the commercial manager negotiates the required terms and conditions and instructs the vessel master accordingly. And post fixture service, including the maintenance of the vessel, accounts, receipt of freight income, appointment of agents, checking the invoice, settlement of the same according to the owner's instruction, resolution of any claims and disputes involving charter. All this comes under. So these are all the commercial managers' duty, which all comes under. Okay. Now, in addition to the discussed role, the commercial manager may be provide sale and purchase breaking service to assist the owner in sale or acquisition of the tonnage. So in providing the various service described above, which we already spoke about, the commercial manager is seeking maximize the vessel's earning power and in case of the S&P function, acquire the dispose of tonnage at the most competitive place. Okay. To do so, the commercial manager must liaise very closely with other parties involved in day-to-day operations. In many instances, the ship managers provide commercial management to vessels which are owned or associated within the parent company in some way. Now let's get into the after the commercial department. Okay. Now let's see what the technical department's job. What is the technical department? Okay. So the technical department, the objective of technical department is that safety. Okay. What is their role? Excuse me. So the primary objective of technical management is safe, pollution free, and cost efficient vessel operation. Okay. The technical team is responsible for the safety, for all the environmental pollution free transport, and cost efficient. What is cost efficient? Fuel efficient. Okay. How can the OH be successfully done with less amount of cost? In accordance with it is not he can who decide it. Okay, it is not the technical department of the ship who decides it. They have to follow the international rules and regulations, and with their consideration, they have to follow and then do the activities. So where due consideration is given to the protection. So you have to protect the environment also. Okay, so can't pollution just because you say you want to go fast, you can't just go very fast without any rules and regulations. You have to look after the pollution. You have to look at the safety of your crew. You have to look at the cost efficient way of operating. So all this technical department will have. Commercial will not come into this. So technical department will decide what to do. Okay. Here, ship requires constant supervision and their structures, their machineries, how efficient they are, what is the age of the ship, how good they are, how the seaworthiness of the ship. All this is decided in technical department. So much of which need a regular program of maintenance. A merchant ship which is not kept in a seaworthy condition will be unemployed. So a merchant ship which is not maintained well and which is not a seaworthy condition, which will not be unemployed, which will still be unemployable. We cannot use that kind of ship. Correct? So seaworthiness apart from ensuring safety of the ship or sinking although that is vital element. The term can also be considered as also meaning cargo worthiness. Okay. No matter how sound the hull of the ship is against this bringing a leak and how good the engine is to propel the ship to her direction. If the hatches let water into the holds or the ventilation is inadequate so that the cargo becomes tangled, then the merchant ship is considered as unseaworthy. So when does it become unseaworthy? When the merchant ship especially, when there is any leaks in the cargo hold, when the engine propeller doesn't work properly. Yeah. So all this condition, it becomes unseaworthy. So looking after the physical structure of the ship fails neatly into two distinct sections, okay, referred as a deck and engine room. The term engine room is easily understood as there is no difficulty in visualizing the compartment of the ship which contain main engine plus auxiliary machinery, such as electricity, generators, pumps, etc. It does, of course, extend a little further than the actual engine room as the term naturally includes the propeller shaft and the propeller at the end of it. Now, it is perhaps better to think in terms of deck as meaning all the rest of the ship which is not covered by expression engine room because that is responsibility of the deck department. Now, when you are failing to ensure the efficiency of the technical department, that will quickly run into the ship into trouble because technical department is handling the safety of the ship, correct? So, any failure in the efficiency of technical department will quickly run ship into trouble, which can vary classification being temporarily withdrawn, okay, pending seaworthiness being restored to extreme of a major catastrophe with the human lives as well as goods being placed at risk. So, as a result of international convention initiated by International Maritime Organization (IMO), which is a division of UN, okay, most of the world's maritime nations have enacted laws which permit port state control. So, a device which enables a ship to be detained until substandard items are put right. Such a detention is one of the risks an owner runs if his technical departments are inadequate or inadequate. Okay, so uh, from UN, from UN Convention, the International Convention initiated the International Maritime Organization. IMO has given so and so guidelines. So when the technical department doesn't work properly, or when the technical department fail to adhere the rules, and sometimes if the ship is not maintained in a good condition, what happens? There is a law which permits port state control. So a device which enables a ship, okay, to be detained. So the ship can be detained. So ship cannot be allowed to used until it is fixed. So this is getting affected if the technical department is not on par or working on perfectly to fix the thing, then your ship is being detained. Then when if a ship is being detained, the ship owner cannot use it, so it becomes unseaworthy. Okay, so when your ship cannot be used, what happens? There won't be any revenue. Correct? So it will keep all of them in danger. So the International Ship Management Code of Practice (ISM) code is another international convention established by IMO, which sets out minimum levels of training, administration, management of ship, and which has been adopted by majority of maritime nations in the world. These ISM code trainings are being given to the manpower or employees whoever is handling the ship business. So whenever you get into a job, they will definitely give you a training which undergoes the certification program of what to do and what not to do and how things to be handled. So this is an international practice and international convention has been authorized this to do. So next is storing. I want to discuss what is storing. So in addition to purchasing needs of technical departments, there are other requirements for equipment. Say now you have maintenance materials and spares and all. So these officers and crew have to be housed and fed and worldwide purchasing requires specialist skills, especially in order to achieve maximum economy without compromising on quality. So store department personnel has have be aware of food habits of various ethnic people, and to be sure adequate supplies of special food are brought, particularly if the ship is trading on area where such items are unobtainable. So what happens in a shipping company, in a ship, you can see lot of various type of citizens there, which from different countries. People are from various countries, various nations, various backgrounds. So each of their food habits are different. Now it is the responsibility of the shipping company to store the needs of their employees. So without compromising the quality, okay, and at the same time, economically, it has to be feasible for the ship owner. Okay, it has to be feasible. So the store department personnel has to be aware of what kind of food they eat, what kind of food they need, and how much supply of food is needed, because he will know what is the time of period of journey the ship is undergoing for 6 months, 3 months. All this has to be stored properly in his vessel. Next, let's get into crewing department. Okay, so with all the successful operation of commercial department, technical department, now we completed commercial and technical department. What it is now, a ship's eventual success or failure will depend upon its officers and crew. Okay, now just a ship is nothing but a metal. Correct? Just being a ship is in the floating, it is just dead. So the life of the ship or this metal which gives life to the ship is through the human beings in it. Correct? So when there are people working inside the ship, then only it will get life. When there is no people in it and it is empty in the sea, the ship is dead. There is no life for it. So crewing department is also a department which gives life for the ship. Okay. So now, after discussing commercial and technical department, now let's see what are the roles of crewing department and how can it be run well. Okay, so ship's eventual success or failure will depend upon its officers and crew. This in turn makes it imperative for the ship managers to have a well-run crewing department. So many different, sometimes opposing factors have an influence upon crewing. Matters the first of which, regardless of any external pressures, is one of safety. There should not be any safety compromise. Okay? Safety is first. So, in an obvious humanitarian sense, in not risking the lives of people in the ship or in any other ship which it might collide. Safety also in material sense concerned, it is not risking enormous financial outlay in hands of incompetent workers. So you should take proper skill powered people on board. So you cannot do any compromise when you are doing the staffing. So your safety will be compromised when you take staffs who are incompetent. Okay? Safety is not only that person, the whole crew, the vessels. There are many people who are working in the ship. The entire crew and the entire materials, the cargo or all the materials will be spoiled if the staffing is not educated or staffing or the crew is not well versed in their duty. So we cannot afford to have a mistake on board once you are in a cruise. So crewing cannot influence anybody to take a job so easily. So you have to be very strict in that. The safety will also be dictated from external source, which in the case of responsible maritime nations will be in the form of statutory manning levels where the precise number and competency of officers and crew will be laid down. So according to the size and type of ship and will be enforced by law and country of registration. The flag of registration of vessel is important because the precise number of competency of the officers crew will be laid down according to the size and type of shipment and will be enforced by the law of the country of the registration. So the flag of registration, okay, where the company, where the ship or the vessel is being registered, decides on the crew name. That law, that registration country's law is applicable on crewing. Okay, so that will decide on how much size and type of ship and how much officers can it handle. All this can be decided upon the flag of registration of the vessel. So, after discussing all three departments, there's other service called ancillary, which we saw earlier. So, apart from technical, commercial, crewing, what is ancillary department now? Uh, This is a multidisciplinary skill-based service. It is hardly surprising that many of the largest ship management companies have sought a broader range of service and they offer in the market. The key areas of diversification have been consultancy, financial service, and insurance service. Okay, all this comes under ancillary service, the consultancy service, financial service, or insurance service. Okay, so what is consultancy service? So this all comes under ancillary. So this has been the most popular targeting the number of large ship managers going to extent of setting up separate consultancy companies as independent or profit center. The consultancy service offered have tended to focus on the management of technical projects, primary vessel, new building, conversion or upgrading works. All this the consultancy will be doing. So arguably, these services are not strictly impartial, as they can be viewed as a means to an end. That is, efforts to increase core business. Nevertheless, the advice is that main pragmatic rather than the theoretical and based on sound practical experience. Now, the typical shipping managers seek daily fees for the provision of consultancy service in a region of $500 per day, possibly more depending on the seniority of the staff involved and specialist nature of the advice provided. Okay, so this is the charge which they get per day when typically the ship managers charge and they're handling consultants. Now the ship manager is likely to see greater efforts by ship managers to sell their expertise, although potential to realize the value of the house and expertise the experience is often third, in such cases of existing clients who inevitably view consultancy services as benefits which should be provided as free as part of management fee. What are financial service now? This also comes under ancillary service. In spite of increasing availability of completely priced debt finance, there is a growing market for provision of financial broking service. Okay, that is in future. Now, recent years we have seen that the debt finance is increasing, but the future says the growing market provision of financial broking services ship owners lacking an understanding of contracts with the banking and lending communities. The FSU ship owners have been an important source of business in this area as they have sought to raise the funds needed for fleet renewal by mortgaging existing vehicles. Okay, they can mortgage the existing vehicles, and a small number of ship managers were also able to spot this growing need, have positioned themselves as a debt finance brokers for which typically they get a percent of fees as payable. So that is also an option which they will look at. Now, let's take a 5 minutes break now, and then we'll get back at say 10:08. We'll get back at 10:08. Okay. Okay. All of you are back from the break. Great. So another service in ancillary service shipping business is the insurance service. So what is insurance basically? Insurance is a protection. Correct. We get take insurance thinking that there is some unforeseen circumstance happen. So insurance comes to save us financially. Correct. Similarly, here financial services, insofar as a soft insurance market in recent years have lowered the cost of securing an insurance cover. Moreover, there is no shortage of specialist insurance brokers available to place insurance and provide claims handling service on behalf of shippers. The strength of existing relationships with clients may enable the insurance department of ship management company with extensive contacts with insurance community to provide advisory service in certain instances. So all these advices, everything is done through insurance service, and that is also under ancillary service or financial. Now, in-house and outsourcing ship management functions. So, what are the in-house and outsourced option a ship management can look at? So, now if you look at the below chart, core activities and subjects of the outsourcing or contracting or outcosts. Now, corporate strategy, marketing, accounting. Okay, these are all in-house. Personnel, S&P management, purchasing, IT, repair maintenance, certification can be outsourced. Cargo procurement, financing, sales and purchase, bunkering, everything again comes in-house. Okay. So the many functions listed can be subdivided further also. Example, if personal function comprise of section of recruitment of C staff, welfare, training, payroll, performance appraisal, etc. These are all under human resource also. Okay, these personal functions can be again subdivided. Hmm? Again, however, this exercise oversimplifies matters in so far as certain elements of functions are reality split between the owner and the manager. Okay. If you take an example, the commercial management, in the commercial management, which will be explained furthermore, we will study that later. So the manager acts as in accordance with the ship owner's instruction. Correct. So in terms of approving alternate charter opportunities, sale, purchase options, and all this appointment of agents and all, is the ship owner's decision that only the ship owner will listen. So in similar way, accounting is split into at least two parts of the which the ship owner focusing on day-to-day management, vessel accounting, and all. Okay. The corporate accounts of single ownership company controlled perhaps by a private investor. Now, what is ship registers? As any vehicle, it need a registration. Okay, it need a registration. Why? It registers in the port. It need a registration so that that particular country's rules and terms and conditions are being followed in the ship. Okay, the ship has to be registered. As a ship spends most of the life in international waters, trading between largest section of countries, it cannot be said that it belong to some other country which is sailing. So automatically, the particular country needs the same factory or some other similar static plant, but the ship cannot be stateless. It cannot be stateless. It cannot say that I don't have country, I don't have a nation, I don't represent any country. It cannot say that. It has to be of one particular country. Where it registers, that country it belongs. Okay. So it belongs to one particular country to the subject of that country's law, which should be incorporate the various international conventions, and then again we study that it has to obey the IMO. The IMO International Maritime Organization's rules and regulations it has to obey. Okay. That is where the ship gets registered. Now, the registration of ship plays a very important role towards the safety and security of the maritime transport, significantly contributes towards the protection, preservation, and marine environment. So in general, what happens is that establishing a ship's nationality for regulating ships registration of ship is particular state by linking the ship to state, the system of the ship registration indicates the state has to be right to protect the ship in international water. Which the state belongs to, which the ship belongs to, that the country is responsible to protect the ship also if there is some any problem with the ship or if it is entering into some threat. It is a responsibility of that particular nation or state to protect the ship. Say the ship register or ship registry gives the ship a nationality flag. Okay, it will have a flag. If you see a flag in a ship, that is the country where it is originated. Okay, so that is the ship's identity. So, yes, ships also have nationality, and the nationality or port of registration is shown on the stern of ship as below. Now, see for example, if you see now world's in Cape Orchid. Okay, there has been registered in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. Okay, you see that now. So this Cape Orchid is the ship name. Okay, and it is registered in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. So what flag will you see? You will see South African flag in it, correct? Because it is identified by IMO number 4. Okay, so if you see here, now this is the ship. Yeah. So if you see here, you can see the South African national flag there. The ship name is Cape Orchid. Where is it registered? Port Elizabeth. And if you see, IMO number is also correct. This is the registration of the ship. You know where the ship is from. This is the identification. Like how we have a registration, car registration, bike registration. Similarly, this is the registration of the ship. Okay. So the IMO needed a method to enhance maritime safety, achieve pollution prevention. What happens? We know how much ships are being registered, so we can know how much ships are being used. Maritime it prevents a fraud in maritime. Okay. So this was adopted in 1987. They become mandatory about this ship registration, and it became a mandatory on 1st January 1996. Okay. So under this resolution, each ship was assigned a permanent number, like a passport or like a document, like our Aadhaar card number. We have a permanent number for a ship for identification purposes. Irrespective of which flag the ship flies or trades under, this IMO number would remain unchanged. It can change the flag, but the number remains the same. It would be reflected on document. Certificates related to the ship will never be reassigned to another ship. Okay. Now, the IMO number again is a permanent basis and it is visible. It has to be visible and it has to be clearly visible on their body. And it deals with, as it deals with human life, for sake of quick response, passengers are required to display the numbers on horizontal surface, which would be visible from the air also. Okay, it has to be horizontally also. The IMO number has to be displayed in the passenger seat. This unique number with the prefix IMO followed by a 7-digit number is assigned to ship upon construction and currently administered by IHS Maritime. Okay, that's where they get this number from. So any self-propelled or sea-going merchant ships of 100 GT, 100 was 10, and above upon keel laying needs to have IMO number. So anything above this will definitely need IMO number. Without IMO number, if it's going to the sea, it will be bad. So below types are excluded. So now ships without a mechanical means of propulsion, that is excluded. Pleasure yachts, that is excluded. That will not need IMO. The ships engaged on special service like light ships, SRA vessels, SR vessels are all excluded. Copper barges, hydrofoils, air cushion ship vehicles are excluded. The holding docks, structure classified similar manner, ships of war and troop ships, wooden ships, all the small one, warships and all cannot have IMO because it is secretly operating. So you cannot that will not have IMO. Okay? Commercially used vehicles will have IMO. So any ship over 100 GT, irrespective of whether it is a cargo vessel, shipping vessel, or fishing vessel, passenger vessel, it has to be registered. So over 100 GT, any vessel is there, it has to be registered. Register grants the ship physical legal protection of the flag, okay, which means they are applicable to vital areas such as safety of the cargo, life, and also on board ship. But ships there need not necessarily be registered under a country. Okay, its own flag. For example, now British shipment need not to be registered mandatorily under British flag or UK it may be registered with the registration that than the British registry also. Okay. So upon registration, the ship will be assigned an official number by the register that the ship is registered with, and official number is different from IMO number. Okay. So if the ship changes its port of registration, then there will be a different official number, whereas the IMO numbers will be still the same. Okay, when even if it is changing, the IMO number will be the same. Okay, the freedom is guiding principle of the law of the sea, and as part of the principles, a ship of any nation can navigate the ocean freely. There is no restriction on behalf of IMO. The ship's national state has exclusive domination over the ship, and no other nation can exercise domination over the ship. Now, traditional registers. What are traditional registers? Traditional registers are ship registers that are administered by an individual country as a national registry for registration of their own ships, flying over their own flag, owned, operated, and manned by the nations of that particular country. So that is all the same country. In traditional registry, the owner of the ship should necessarily be from the country of registration. Okay, the same country has to be from. The place of business also will be the same. The country of registration only has to be. This registration and linking of national registry also means that these ships may be reposted at any reposted at any time of war and transportation of goods and people in the service of the nation. It is basically completely owned by that particular nation. Everything is belong to that one nation. That means it is traditional. Open. Open registers are ship registers that allow ship owners of other nationalities to flag and operate ships under their flag. Okay. And FOC, flag of convention. This is a type of open registry, but slightly different from FOCs. May also offer some additional features, such as an attractive fiscal regime, say, a lower administrative fee, more accessibility to registry, flexibility to use maritime safety policies, lower set corners. FOCs usually has no genuine link between the state and the ship that are flagged under the state. Say, if the ship is not owned by anyone from that country of registration, the ship is not operated by anyone from the country, and the country of registration has no crew members or any other kind of administration. The technical and social connection with the ship, with the ship is all different. Okay, because of this, the organization like ITF, International Travel Workers Federation, find it difficult for unions or industry stakeholders and public to hold ship owners accountability. Okay, that is why FOCs have a little drawback in it. So this is how the certification of registry looks like. So what are different type of ship registers? We discussed those earlier. We generally have more stringent criteria as only citizens traditional. We discussed it. What is open registers? We discussed it. There is offshore international registers where registers are set up countries traditionally and exclude ships from original register. The dual bareboats registers, the registers allow barefoot charters. And the countries which allow dual registration, let's say Germany, Australia, Liberia, Philippines, they have dual charters. Okay. So this is what happens would permit a company owned and controlled by non-nationals to operate ships under its flag. Okay, they would permit beneficial owners to reside and operate elsewhere and maintain all accounting of banking operations and keep all profits in a different country. And they can permit to the employment of crew any nationality. They don't need it is on the same from the same nation. They would demand a minimum wage also. Offshore registers are established a favorable taxation regime, flexibility of employment regulations and all. That is offshore registers. So in this chapter, we learned the ship managers are how ship managers are concerned with the taking care of the ship, the responsibility of manning, maintaining the supply of and ensuring the ship is available for the operators for maximum amount of possible time, for efficient management of shipping company, what is essential to be keep and list of the international conventions and regulations, or flag of the ship, how what are the state rules, how the ship is registered, uh, and all the shipping company has to be efficiently monitored activities of operation department, technical department, crew department. All this we have been studied in this chapter. Okay. The next is commercial operations. To discuss a lot of commercial operations, let's go in depth of what the commercial operations actually do. As discussed earlier, commercial management is mainly concerned about miscellaneous ship breaking service relating to profitable employment of vessel as per the interest of ship owner. Okay, it includes marketing of the vessel on voyage, on the time of wear of boat, charter market. All his efforts concentrated are on efficient usage of the vessel in maximizing the revenue. How efficiently you can use the vessel to get the profit for the ship owner. Okay, that is the main business of commercial defense. Okay, they are mainly appointed, or the commercial department's focus is to get profit. So commercial operations related to OH. What are that we can expect during the commercial operation during the OH? So to ensure that the master knows and understand exactly what is expected of him and the ship. Okay. These are the four primary tasks which the commercial department, operation department has for tasks. So, what are this operation department task, which is to communicate with the commercial one? Okay. So, to monitor voyage, to view the minimizing expense, maximizing the income. Okay. Then to be on the lookout for potential problems, disputes, and try to resolve them before they get out of hand. Okay. Prevention is better than cure. They say you prevent maximum problems, and you should anticipate if there is any problem coming. That also has to be found and addressed, then delayed. To act as clearinghouse information within the ship manager's offices, everyone that they need to know about what is happening in the ship and going on in order to be able to do their jobs properly. So once the nature of employment has been decided, the full details should be passed to the operation department by the owners by their catering brokers. So the details should include what details it should include: the cargo and its size, what is the cargo and what is its size, loading and discharging ports together with the restrictions, if any. I should mention what are the restrictions, if there is any. Notice the readiness and that are required to be given to the charterers and the shippers for the consignors and agents. Any special instructions, if there is any, that also has to be given. So this information has to be relayed onto the ship's master without a delay. So as soon as possible, operation department should be obtain a copy of the charter copy so that complete details of the what is agreed can be stated. The relevant items should then be discussed with the master so that fully understand and expected from him. The next task of operation department will be contact the agents of loading port, and then they should be asked to provide the ideal situation for operation management should be an opportunity of contacting and agents while the employment is under negotiation before that is been fixed. At the same time, operation department should liaise with the appropriate departments within the ship management company to ensure. Okay, what is the other thing? They have to operation department have to liaise with the appropriate department within the ship management company, so that the crew mail is being dispatched to the ship most in a most expeditious means. Always providing time limits. You should give a proper time limit before such and so this has to be reached. Any spares or ordered or awaiting dispatch are sent to the ship again. Okay. Any crew changes or organized well in advance, that has to be attested. Any all the arrangements of classification service renewed. Okay. Now arrangements are made to store lubricants to be provided on board. The master's advises so that he can know cash he needs advance in the crew for the voyage. That has to be well in advance. They have to decide. So all this is their duty. So chartering. So we have discussed the time charters and all. What is chartering and all. So now in case of time charter, the procedure will differ slightly. Okay, time charters will be issuing voyage instructions to the vessel. Here, what happens? The time charterers knows what it is. So they will instruct that instructions to the vessel, so that it is most important to ensure that the master is advised that who those charterers are. So the master should know who are these time charterers and what is their requirement. The master should also be advised that length of period of intended trade, and it is common for owners to prohibit. Such as say, owners can say, no, we cannot use this so and so goods. It is dangerous. So master should know it. So master will need to know about all this as to react promptly to receive contrary orders from the time charter. Most urgent information will, of course, be the place and arrangements that have been agreed for the delivery of the ship to the time charterers, together with the name and all those details. Such a practice of charterers taking vessels on time charter for trips becomes widespread. It is obvious that we need estimated daily profit on this type of fixture on the same day as OA charterer order to compare the two results. Merchants often prefer to take a vessel on time charter either for a trip or period. Okay. Fortunately, this is much simpler exercise for the ship to take delivery or previous discharge for. Okay. This is voyage estimates. What is voyage estimate? So the time, what is the period? What period or time taken for the estimated time of this voyage? Okay. So whether the management department or company becomes closely involved in such calculations, whether this problem is left entirely on ship owners catering department. It is important that ship manager is fully aware of the process of voyage estimating. He should know about it. If for no other reason, it is vital to understand how various pieces of data supplied by the ship manager fit into process of evaluating the profitability of proposed voyage. Okay, so he has to calculate about taking all the factors, bits and pieces of data. He will calculate whether it is profitable or not. First essential is to examine whether the subject heading itself, voyage estimating, includes voyage and time charter trips. The latter are rarely straightforward as they seem to be pitfalls. Will be explained, that we will explain later. So that is not a suggested aim, and less than accuracy is essential to seek to achieve. Test of accuracy is estimated to final voyage results. For voyage estimating, it is essential to have knowledge of maritime geography. So with particular regard to the distance and load language. So there are several sets of distance tables commercially available that can be used to, but to avoid absurd mistakes, one should always have fairly accurate idea of major world distance. The usual method is to divide the world into areas, okay, and naturally this mainly falls into oceans, and then learn a number of strategic mileage across each area. Alternately, instead of accurate distance, one can think in terms of steam. So as a useful guide, a speed of say 14 knots works out at almost exactly 3 days per 1,000 nautical miles. So on this basis, it is easy to remember that a transatlantic ocean, okay, from US Gulf to Rotterdam is 15 days, while that from Hampton Roads to the same destination lasts for 11 days. So under this simple representative voyage can be calculated and memorized. Provided you remember the correct the time of vessel and the differing speeds, this should make a task considerably easy. So this is how you estimate your voyage time. So length of the voyage. Part of the essential is to define the voyage since mean a different things to different people. So it is recommended that the commencement of voyage should be also be from time to place and ship completes its previous cargo. So in this matter, what happens? The previous cargo, where it stopped and how long it stopped there, that consideration you have to take, and which is the last leg of the cargo, that consideration you have to take, and which we have how much discharge is being done, that we'll have to take. Some people, including the commerce voyage at loading port, and follow the Latin passage with theoretical ballast back to the loading port again. However, while this might at times be realistic for tankers, dry cargo, and the same voyage twice as hardly practical solution. So with the distance to hand, it is not difficult to estimate the length of the sea. Okay, so this calculation has to be made. then this calculation is very essential, also very crucial, because when if there is a margin of error in it, then you can go completely wrong in your calculations. The speed is another important factor. In some cases, it may be better to proceed more slowly and economize the bunkers. Particularly, this is a case of coastal estimating, where voyages and dependent on tides. There may be a little point in steaming full speed only to await a suitable tide for some hours of arrival of port. Cargo quantity. Just give me 2 minutes. We'll continue the class. Okay. So, what is cargo quantity? So, initially, one needs to know the vessel's total deadweight. Okay. Then this is on assumption that there is no draft limitations anywhere in the world. Okay. So from this, what happens that we will able to determine how much efficiently the tonnage we can carry. Okay, in the deep sea. So this is very critical calculation where we will have to know the total deadweight and how much can it carry on board. Now the other deductible before arriving the true cargo capacity is the amount of bunkers on board. Okay, this can be complex calculation, and this is the best explained by examples which is in your syllabus. We can go through the example. There are various examples with a calculation they are given. Okay, so here what happens? This vessel may be able to lift a particular tonnage of cargo, but has it the space to carry it? That's another thing. Okay. So this is where importance of a storage factor comes into picture. So in theory, by dividing the gain or bare cubic of vessel by SF, we reach the volume capacity. But if there is several type of grades of cargo, then it is impossible even to fill vessel, while trim and stability must be watched. Okay. So time report. So once the cargo quantity, loading and discharging rates per day is offered by a charterer, that is known as the port time. Okay. And this port time can be estimated with some accuracy. As always, there are pitfalls because it is a rare of weekends and in holidays to count in dry cargo fixtures, and this coupled with notice time and weather delays expand the port time also. Okay, let us take an example. So here a vessel is to load 35,000 tons of cargo, and the charter loading rate is 2,500 tons per weather working day for 24 consecutive hours. Sundays and holidays expected. Okay. So if one divides 35,000 by 2,500, it will be seen that loading time allowed for the charter is 14 days. Basically, just to load that, it will take 14 days. However, excluding weekends, it will consider the working day as 5. Then the time permitted upward is 3 weeks. Okay. If allowances are also made for notice, the time and weather delays, it will become realistically to allow 20 days in port for loading. Okay. As per calculation, it is only 14. But because of holidays and time delays and weather condition, it can go to 20 days in loading. If the loading is to take place over a period of extensive public holiday, for example, Christmas or New Year, Ramadan, even more port time will be allowed. Needless to say, if the time allowed includes Sundays, holidays, less allowance will be needed. Perhaps 15 days, even the SHINC, there are inevitable delays. Okay, in arriving, shifting, and notice period waiting for tides, etc. Other delays, what are the other delays we can expect? Under the heading, one has calls for bunkering, which can on occasion be lengthy. For estimating process, however, it is sufficient to allocate 1 day for each all. The canal transit inevitably lengthens the voyage, and it is safer to allow 2 days each for passage through Suez and Panama because the time can be lost waiting as well as during the transition. It is not normal to allow additional streaming time for possible bad weather unless it is certain that nature of voyage that delay the experience. These are the other delays which we can. So time charter equivalent is calculated by taking voyage revenue, subtracting the voyage expense, including the canal, bunker, and port cost. Okay, and then dividing the total by a round trip voyage duration in the period. It gives shipping companies a total measure, a tool to measure the period to period changes. Cost, very important factor, cost. So as I explained, the consistently changing, and in order to keep track, the changes operation department have to check constantly with all departments. Okay, with all major suppliers also. This process is a time consuming one. And if the manager does not purchase a large tonnage throughout the year, he might well find it more expedient to employ one of the specialist bunker brokers. Now, the ship manager should always bear in mind that the majors, that means the large international oil companies, for example, Shell, Texaco, BP, do not necessarily offer cheapest one. Small independent supplier can offer sometimes better the prices of the major, but quality also we need to see. Okay. Now, what factors affecting vessel performance and post fixture management? Okay, this is also important. The relationship between operations and ship management functions is usually distinct. They are often not the same organization as in case of chartered shipping, or when the owner operates the ship but subcontracts management elsewhere. Often the operators have no direct contract with the ship managers, their communication being telephone, telex, and data. This is the usual communication mode. So operation itself covers a wide field, including the sale, purchase of the ship, bunkers, time voyage chartering, voyage cost, freight rates, conference rules, agencies, legislation in regard carriage of goods on sea, etc. The prime function of operation is to seek a suitable business for the owners, ships, even to extend the chartering them to other to operate. Alternatively, if some amount of business they find exceeds the capacity of their ship, they themselves may charter in to carry the excess. They will again take because since they are a ship owner, they have another capacity. They will use another ship to carry the excess goods, charter the excess. So having found the cargo and the ship, it to carry the task and operators to relation to ship can consider under the following heads. You can see what are. The post fixture management is concerned about the following activities: maintenance of the vessel, a receipt of freight income, appointment agents of steward, checking the invoices, settlement of same according to the owner's instruction. Operation itself covers a wide field, including the sale, purchase, ship, bunker supplies, time and voyage chartering, voyage cost, freight rates. We discussed this. So next is technical management. After commercial, we will get into technical management. What is technical management? Here we will get through the important aspects of technical management. Okay. Here we'll discuss about various methods of ship acquisition. How do we acquire ship? Various process of vessel into inducting vessel into a fleet. What are the steps of that? Discuss here you will have to know about methods of planned maintenance and emergency repairs. How do we handle it? And discuss the importance of dry docking and annual special surveys. What is the importance of that? And outline the methods of managing the ship's capacity. Okay, we'll just take a 2 minutes break and then get into this. Okay. So the main objective of technical department is to maximize the reliability and availability of ship's equipment and to extend its life to maximize maximum possible. Okay. The activities associated with the function are carried out between the technical experts, ashore, and staff in ships. It is pretended to well informed about the importance of repair, dry docking, as well as underwater repair, maintenance, storing, ability to respond to the short-term situations, incidents, provision of adequate parts of equipment, service to shipper. So all this maintenance part comes under technical too. So this, if properly handled, will help in the maximum life of the ship. So what are the aspects of technical departments that we can look at? So the technical function of ship management is to care for the ship. Basically, as I said, because they are the one who are responsible for the long lifing of the ship's survival, the technical aspects. Uh, so this includes how they take care of the ship structure and how the engines are being handled, how well they are being maintained, how well they are being serviced, how the cargo handling are done, how the carrying equipments are being taken care of, all this. So the technical management is subdivided into various service elements. Okay, these different elements are in turn made up of individual tasks, which are conducted and designed by office areas and sea staff. Okay. Now, ship acquisition. Let's see what is ship acquisition. Outright purchase. Okay. We discuss about outright purchase. The traditional way of procuring ships to buy them outright. The company will either use its own cash source to buy the vessel or more likely obtain a loan to buy the vessel. This is outright purchase. There's something called new build. The very largest companies may employ their own naval architects and design a staff to create a type. We discussed what is new build. And they want to future or this function may be delegated into independent naval architects. More commonly, companies may buy vessel and pre-existing shipyard, design it, tailor it. Now, the buyer can go for deferred payments terms acquisition of new building, in which case he may have supported a bank guarantee. Availing seller's credit provided by a builder, the new ship can be acquired and has to be counter granted by buyer's bank. Okay. The seller's credit, yard financing, bank guarantee are the other way of acquiring a new building. Okay. Is there any history of recurring fault such as excessive wear on stern tube bearings indicating possibility of shaft misalignment? Any evidence of serious damage? Outstanding condition of class, physical inspection of the vessel to be focused to more critical areas. Okay. The purchase and sale of second-hand vehicles. What happens here? Other companies may concentrate on building up their fleet by buying second-hand tonnage, and for this purpose, will use the service of sale and purchase broker. The market for second-hand ships are vibrant and encouraging. Bank finance is also available for second-hand ships, subject to certain mortgage security. Finance through intermediaries. Increasingly, ship owning companies are using the more innovative ways to procure the ships. Okay. So what happens? They are operating company. The concept of approach has been leasing rather than owning a vessel. That they found it more profitable. Sale and lease back. So economists consider the leasing as the third most important method of acquiring a vessel. Okay? It is 100% financing method which is a strong relief to the ship owner, especially on a high shipping price range. So in the traditional finance scarcely does it cover 80% of the project. So here what happens, the ship owner doesn't have to pay full amount. So he is in a very safe place. If he wants to stop the business, he can stop the business. Okay. But he doesn't have the headache of the ship being liability for him because he is leased it. So that is why economists consider leasing as the third most important method. So in financial leasing, the provider of the capital purchases the asset to be leased back to the entrepreneur, the leasing, who operates it, with the financial being legal owner to the asset and leasing the requires lease collateral compared to the bank loan. So, what is meant by planned maintenance? Planned maintenance is a system of controlling maintenance of a ship through schedules of regular examinations, overhauls, okay, renewals, or replacement, coating, etc. of all parts of the structure, machinery, equipment, etc. with flexibility. Purchasing. So purchasing, what is purchasing? Purchasing is involving arranging supply of spare parts, store, lubricants, chemicals, all the miscellaneous other products, services which require vessels to run its day-to-day operations, basis together with the inventory control and control of suppliers, subcontracting and supply contractors. Okay, contract. Through the path of technical management, purchasing is a profession in its own right, and as many way offered by separate service of the ship owner, client willing to contract out essential activity to management companies offering stronger buying power and the specialist skill to contracts. Okay. Now, dry docking and annual special service. So, vessel dry docking. Okay. So a periodic servicing is required for any machine. Whichever is running for a long time, after a long journey or long trip, a periodic check is being done. Okay? So according to the vessel dry docking of the vessel, in accordance with the class and owner's requirement, inevitably involves a heavy expenditure. The ship manager must be able to offer its clients a good planning, negotiating, and cost management skills, as well as a technical expertise. So, in essence, a ship manager must be able to coordinate all pre-docking activities, including the preparation of a detailed specification based on information on vessel's performance and technical conditions supplied by master and CAE in the form of dry dock work list. So, factors influence the shipowner selection of a repair yard, including price, terms of payment, delivery, pre-delivery cost, project management, dry dock operation, including assessment. All these are being carried out. So, what are the contents of a vessel inspection report? So, when there is a vessel inspection, then this is the contents included in vessel inspection report. The control sheet, okay, the circulation list or guidelines to use it. External condition that including the proper radar, funnel structure, bridge front, all this external condition has to be checked. Deck condition has to be checked, so including the mooring ropes, masts, fitting, winches, windlass, deck flapper, plug deck, trails, hatch, everything has to be checked. And then internal hull structure. So that includes the aft or forepeak, chain locker, storage rooms, cargo holds, pipe tunnels. This has to be checked. That all comes under internal hull structure. Next is the accommodation of or superstructure, including the outer decks, rails, fittings, storage space, washrooms, funky island, wheelhouse, all comes under that. Then navigation and radio equipment, including steering controls, DF equipments, speed locks, radars, okay, echo sounders. Then engine room, including the general appearance, ME, auxiliary generators, auxiliary boilers, compressors. They are all working fine. That also will come. Then what is after engine room? It comes cargo equipment. So what are the other things in cargo equipment, including cargo witches, motors, hydraulic lines, lashing gears, wires, cargo blocks, cargo pumps, that comes under cargo equipment. Then SEP equipment. What are SEP equipments come including alarms, vent flaps, oil water separators, then LSAs, that life saving appliances, firefighting appliances, all those comes under SCP equipment. Then SAP reports, report book, log book, PMS reports, all the charts, publications, etc. has to be checked. Then crew performance, including average lag and ballast speeds, ME consumptions, auxiliary consumptions, everything comes under crew performance. Pending stores and spares training, defect list, summary of the defectiveness and requiring corrective actions has to be mentioned in that list. Okay. So in this chapter, we have basically learned the technical management. So this all is technical management is compared to the safety of the vessel and how well if the main technical team is handling the safety and the maintenance of the ship, that long the ship can last. Okay, and if the ship lasts that long, that profit the ship owners and employees can get. At the same time, the revenue, how effectively the ship maintenance can be done using a proper checks. And this is how during the proper checks only the seaworthiness of the vessel is being we get the seaworthiness of the vessel. At the same time, how profitable can the maintenance of the ship be done in a periodical dry docking way. Okay, and how the funds being arranged on which type, how is the ship being arranged, on which type of finance being used, how is it through raising equity or capital, or is it through leasing, and all this we have discussed in this chapter. Okay, so we have covered 3 units in this today's session, and we will have been left with another 2 more units, which we will continue in afternoon session 2 o'clock. Okay. So we'll meet you. I'll meet you at 2 o'clock today. Until then, we'll take a short break. Huh? Okay. Thank you.